Wonderful.
How many groups is the whole class interviewing?
5 groups?
Oh, I feel honored. Tell me the other 4.
I'm not sure off the top of my head.
I don't know.
Quickly.
I actually have the list here if you want me to read
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
The first group is with White Swan Environmental. And then there's the Joe Ackerman project. I can never pronounce it right. But that one, and then there's us. And then Friends of San Juan.
Great.
And the Galliano Conservancy Association are like the ones that we've all signed up for. There were 2 others though that just there wasn't enough people to fill the group.
Great. Fantastic. Yeah, we just did a brainstorming session day before yesterday with Redfish. Same groups. It was great. I wasn't able to sit in on the rest of them, and I'm sorry for that, but deadlines are deadlines.
All right. So if everyone's ready, we can start with some of the questions then.
Great.
So Nikki, we sent you the list of the questions before, and I think we've come up with maybe 2 or 3 more that we'll just ask throughout. But other than that, they're the same questions as before. And so you know what's happening. We've decided to split them up into groups of 2. So I will ask the first 2 questions, and it'll kind of continue for there. So our first question for you is, how has your organization been impacted by COVID-19?
Basically, our environmental education programs went out the window for the spring and the summer. And our field work, which is kind of our spine, our spinal column, that's been on hold until the latter part of May. So we're doing a lot of planning around guidelines for health for the crew, that kind of thing, but mostly environmental education.
And I know that most of your environmental education is hands-on stuff. So have you been looking into kind of alternatives for that throughout this, or?
Yeah, I haven't had time, but fortunately another group that we just adore in Victoria, World Fisheries Trust and Sequaria. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're fantastic people. I've known them for over 20 years. They're doing some really exciting marine learning online. And so when I heard about that, I went, oh, okay, I don't have to worry about that at the moment. Just to give you a little background, you know, we have our mandate of restoration, education, and conservation. And I've taken this time, but also, as you can tell, I'm older. So I'm in transition with trying to figure out how to keep this organization going into the future, bring on more young people, and think more into myself about the bigger picture. So that's what I'm trying to do with my time is help people do the grants for the short-term projects and think in larger perspectives so that we can sustain this organization even if I'm not in the front line anymore. So that's what we're spending. That's what I'm spending when I finally got these final reports out yesterday to kind of think about that. And this time of COVID has given me the quiet and the lack of going out in the world an advantage. So I'm really privileged. I know individually I'm really privileged, and organizationally we're really privileged because we're on a 5-year project and we're 3 years into that. So we have funding for the next 2 years, and that gives us a certain kind of stability, at least for the staff.
And then what strengths within your organization are you drawing upon during this time of uncertainty?
So we have a lot of perspectives from both our staff and from the board and our larger community. And so I'm bringing them in closer and brainstorming with them, asking them for advice, drawing on their experience and their knowledge. And that has to do with logistics for our field work coming up with our programming and our planning for the future. I made some notes, so that's why I'm glancing over here. Yeah, so just bringing in people a little bit closer to what I'm thinking, what are they thinking, what can they add to it, how can we think outside the box.
And from this experience with COVID-19, what insights have you developed from it? And would you have any recommendations for other like companies that are in the same situation as you?
Yeah, the nonprofit world is a really interesting world. It's really interesting. Maybe you've discovered that already. We can think outside the box. Hopefully we do. I think that's one of our functions, is to look at how business is carried out in society and not only plug the holes where the damage is done because of that business, but also to think of an alternate way of doing our economy and doing our relationships, and also having a more freedom to voice our discontent, if you will. So it all has to do with power.
Yeah.
Whether you're talking about the economy or government or relationships, it's all to do with power. And so in nonprofit worlds, we can look at different models to share that power instead of a top-down kind of thing. So if I was to say insights in the last couple of months since COVID, I would say just keep on sharing that power, keep on asking the questions, keep on giving license to make the table rounder, and include more people when we can, and especially listen carefully to my younger staff, because they do bring in, oh, such a fresh air, such fresh air. So it's about sharing leadership, sharing power. I keep guiding the boat. So I hear the ideas and I have to keep thinking, okay, so what are the priorities, that kind of thing. I don't let that go. I'm still at the helm, but a lot of people are behind me guiding that boat along with me. So again, I'm bringing the staff in closer, hopefully, and the board in closer, and those people that I trust with their advice and their visions, how we can incorporate that more into our daily and our monthly and our yearly mission. I wouldn't call it mission. I call it just how we fulfill that mission. The mission doesn't change.
And have you experienced or came upon any unexpected opportunities that have arisen from this period of mass upheaval?
I wish I had been in on your class on Monday, because I think you know some of this stuff. So I'm not going to act like this is news. But I think because I'm in good health, because my partner is in good health, because I'm privileged and I have a house that's not going anywhere, you know, there's a lot of status that I have that allows me to think beyond daily existence. And having had all those advantages, I have the license to think with hope that we do not go back to normal. Our business as usual has caused this virus. And I don't think we're making the connections clear enough with ourselves and within our communities that this virus didn't come out of the blue. It comes out of overstepping our boundaries, from overpopulation, overdevelopment, the way that we produce our energy, the way we travel, the way we obtain our food. Our global capitalistic economy has created the problem. I have no doubts about that, but I don't think the connections are being made at least sufficiently. And so if I were to say how things have changed in my thinking, it's that I have this huge hope that we won't go back to business as normal. And I kind of have this feeling that we can't. So given that, how could we change to a more local green economy, to put it briefly? How could we obtain our food? How could we entertain ourselves? How could we come together as communities? How could we provide the globe's needs without going into a huge global economy that's killing us? So it just gives me more thinking about a restoration economy. And when I say restoration, I'm talking socially, culturally, and ecological restoration. Yeah, I really, really, really don't want to go back to business as usual. It's not healthy. It's killing us, all of us. And I think you all agree with that. I wish I was a bug on the wall to hear your discussions about that, because I think that's why you're taking the course. Am I right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it just gives us more time to think about that and talk about it amongst ourselves and say, geez, what could this look like? Now, it hasn't happened fast enough because we still are all in our silos, both how we as North American non-Indigenous people work. We work in silos, and especially in the nonprofit world, we work in silos. So we haven't created a movement strong enough to be a three-legged animal that could present to the government right now, let's go this way instead of your usual pipeline mentality. It's too bad, because this was, if we were more organized with each other and got rid of the ideological bindings that prevent us from thinking more collectively, I think we could have been in a better spot to move something forward during this time. But it's not too late. It's just that we need to keep talking with each other like you are about what would this look like. It's not that we just need to change. What does that change look like? And we haven't talked about it as a large community enough to bring out the strategy to make it happen. What does resilience to me? Is that the next question? What's
Yeah, I was just about that. You kind
Okay.
of just said a lot of stuff about that, but yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
I use eelgrass, what we store a lot of the last 20 years, as a metaphor. It grows underground clonally. So it has all these underground connections that are not totally visible, but all of a sudden from a few plants, if the conditions are right, you can have a huge meadow, all from the same plants. It's very tough. It's very what we call plastic. It can adapt to a lot of different changes in temperature, even substrate, water clarity, all kinds of things. It's a really dynamic plant, and it's beautiful. So I've been bitten many years ago by eelgrass, and I use it as a metaphor to suggest that it does show us resiliency. The problem is well, I'll define that. To me, resiliency is being able to function and create the same reasons for other life to use it. So what we call in biology, it maintains its form and function no matter what you throw at it. It's still resilient. Well, we've reached that point in history where eelgrass is really having a tough time. So a few years ago, we mapped it all around the Gulf Islands, and we come back to it in 2019, 2020, and we find it's less dense. It's being really impacted by both watershed activities, sediment, agricultural runoff, all those things, and boat activities where it anchors right in there and digs it up. So how to keep resiliency with eelgrass, if you can bear with me, is to reduce those impacts, which we call cumulative effects, all those human activities we do on the land and in the water, and also increase resiliency by maybe planting it in a more dense form. So instead of 10 shoots per meter squared, we do 20 shoots per meter squared. Maybe create some barriers, like signage on the water, preventing people from anchoring into it. A lot of signage, a lot of education. My whole thing about restoration is I really would like to be out of a job. I think that restoration is necessary because we're not treating the world respectfully. You change that behavior and that attitude, restoration becomes a done deal. Okay, so I'd love in my lifetime to say to you guys, there's no more restoration needed. You know, let's keep moving towards education, awareness, all that stuff. So how does that apply to human beings? Well, it may have been beyond your lifetime, but I lived during the time of AIDS when an immune deficiency disease hit my community extremely hard. And I was part of that whole movement to get on top of AIDS and HIV. And it had to do with a decreased immune system in human beings. So what could we do about that? And how did we cope with it? And how can we use that culturally, what we've learned, both from the living world of nature, non-human beings, and the epidemics that we've been through before? And to me, part of resiliency is about working collectively, and that increases our immune system to impacts such as climate change and economic depressions, and natural and unnatural disasters. So I hope I haven't strayed too much, but it has to do with looking at the strengths we have, seeing where our weaknesses are, and working collectively to address those. And so bringing it back down to Seachange and a nonprofit world, what I see is teaching other people what we've learned over the last 20 years around habitat restoration, but more importantly, how to form community to do restoration. I mean, we could be a consulting company, just goes in, does the work, goes out, and you haven't really addressed the immune system of that habitat by increasing knowledge, information, awareness in the community itself. So the same damage keeps getting done. So one of the ways I think about resiliency is to create a larger community of nonprofits in the state of Georgia. And I call it the Strait instead of the Sailor Sea because like-minded people are already doing this in Puget Sound, as you're aware of. So we need to work on this side of the border in the Strait, which is kind of the northern part of the Sailor Sea, to come together. And because I love restoration so much, both sociologically and ecologically, to come together with First Nations and say, how can we create a stronger, resilient community on this side of the border to affect change, restoration-wise and behaviorally wise, and then communicate with our neighbors down south about how can we work together more. That to me is resiliency. It's not continuing business as usual in the nonprofit world, which is everyone goes after the same grants and everyone does their little thing. It's great that we do that because a lot of places have been protected and restored because of that thinking, but it's not good enough anymore. Climate change affects everything. And so let's broaden and make bigger the boat, the canoe, and let's start going in the same direction collectively. One of the things that I got from Redfish was great. Just 2 days ago, Joe Ackerman, I talked about this network idea. It's not a new idea, but it's not being acted upon actively right now, especially in community-based restoration. He said, and he reminded me of our previous experience, let's start with a feast. And so my mind is just going very fast about let's start with First Nations and creating this community because their history, their cultural harvesting practices are the baseline for restoration to me. It's not what this place looked like 20 years ago, it's what it looked like so many thousands of years ago. So that's got me going the last two days about how do we start this network. We do a series of feastings in various First Nations communities and ask elders and others, what are you comfortable sharing with us about your clam harvesting, for example, where you got your oysters, where were the kelp forests, and begin with that as our baseline and branch out from there with that information to create a stronger network. It was a great conversation because two First Nations people were speaking from their heart, and it reminded me, yeah, I can speak from my heart too. I've had that experience and I forget it. And I go into another way of organizing, which is let's go get a large room and let's go talk about data and put the maps on the wall and see who's doing the, you know, we all know that method, but the one that really seems to persist in my imagination and my heart is the one that starts with food and good conversation and music and being outdoors if possible when COVID lifts, and community. And Joe reminded me of that, and I'm just so grateful for him. Oh yeah, I know this one. I just forget because I'm in this other world.
So I think that was a lot of lovely things that you just said about resiliency. I want to thank you for that. But moving on to our next question, I think you actually might have touched on this a bit in speaking to being a nonprofit organization. But what unique advantages do social ecological organizations like yours face with like navigating times of uncertainty like this?
I think we can speak our mind more freely. You know, government agencies not telling us, well, don't talk to so-and-so and don't say such and such. So when I'm outdoors talking to the public or with kids, I can pretty well speak my mind. There's no repercussions. I haven't had them so far anyway. So we can peek around the corner of our missions and say, what could we be doing differently, and how can we express ourselves differently to wake ourselves up as a culture to stay alive and to flourish.
Amazing. And then our last prescribed question, at least, is what learning from this dramatic period of change might you integrate into your organization as you move forward?
Yeah, I think it's just about keep talking about climate change in terms of what can we be doing right now to mitigate and turn this ship around as the ice flows are coming at us very quickly. Like, I'm a person of the 60s. That's where I came of age, right? And that's long before you were born. And even then, we were talking about how this is all going to crash. It can't sustain itself. I won't go into what it is. You all know it. You live it. I mean, you're paying these incredible rents, right? You're having difficulty just getting by. You're having a hard time finding work. All that is come because of the way we were doing business. And so even in the 60s, we were talking about the dinosaur, which we call this thing. And people don't like to call it capitalism, but that's what it is, global capitalism. When it starts to fall, when this dinosaur starts to fall, it's going to affect every piece of our being, every, economic, sociologically, and ecological. And we thought it's going to be a long drawn out fall, and it's going to affect different people at different times. But I never suspected that it would happen economically and socially so quickly. I was expecting, we're seeing the storms, and if I can say this as a metaphor, I think nature's been talking to us about floods and earthquakes and hurricanes, but she's noticed that we're not paying attention. This one caught our attention, and there's no way to escape. I mean, if we're having a hard time in California, or we're rich in North Vancouver, and you're having a hard time, you can always take a plane and go to France. Nope, can't escape. So what I like about this time is that for some of us, and hopefully larger than I know, we're taking the time to reflect on how we would like to do our life differently, and maybe even how we would do our life differently collectively as a culture. So what have I learned? What do I want to carry forward? It's about keep trucking for change. Keep talking about this, especially with young folk. You're going to be taking the reins. You are taking the reins. I want to be there for you. I want to be strong for you. I want to share in what you know and hopefully provide some opportunities for you to make a living. I want to see that on a large scale. I really do care about you. There's a lot of us in my generation who really do care. A lot of us didn't just take the goodies and run. You might think that because it looks that way, right? But it's not true. There's a lot of us who still care. And if there's anything that my generation or nonprofits in general can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out, because it's really important to us for us to be there for you. Yeah. I also think that it's incredibly important to keep working on diversity, not only diversity in the environment, but diversity culturally in how we do business. And you know, that's really key to a lot of our work, is how to include diverse ages, genders, cultures, ethnicities. And we still have a lot of work to go on that. I've been working on that for a long, long, long time. And that's just keep on trucking for change. Yeah, I think I've got it. Yeah, I jotted down this morning anyway. Any comments? I'm interested in hearing comments from you and what you're thinking, if we still have a little bit of time.
Oh yeah, we have some more time. I was actually going to ask you another question. So we talked about kind of what our class is about just before I think all of us managed to get in here. And so our class is about hope and gratitude. And my question towards you now, after hearing all these great answers, was, when you go through times like these throughout your entire life, and maybe specifically towards COVID-19, what do you turn to for hope, and what are you grateful for? And that doesn't necessarily have to be anything very personal, but what do you kind of look for in your organization and the people that you work for or work with?
I will be personal because it's fine with me. I consider the work that I do as a spiritual path, and that's not to follow any particular ideology. It's what makes me get up in the morning. It's what feeds my heart and my mind. And this whole thing about being a collective rather than individual groups is a spiritual aim of mine. I think that the only way we're going to get through this is collectively. So that's one piece of it. Hope to me is something I think about a lot. I used to be Pollyanna a lot. I'm still an idealist, but it's changed. The idealist from the 60s, we're going to change the world overnight, and it's all going to look great, and we're all going to get through this. And now it's being much more in the present. I'm not sure about the outcomes, and it's not being attached to those outcomes. There's a great saying that you may have heard already about the 4 principles of any spiritual path. It's to pay attention, speak the truth, let's think about this. Show up, first one, pay attention, speak the truth, and don't be too attached to the outcomes. I love those sayings because I think a lot of us haven't shown up yet, much less pay attention. So if I talk about hope, it's terms of allowing the space and the opportunities for people to show up, and then to pay attention to what the world has to say to them, the world being human and non-human life. And then speak the truth. How we come to truth comes from our heart as well as our mind, but not be too attached to the outcomes. And that's where I've been working on that concept of hope. Hope to me in the past has been, it's all going to turn out okay, right? I'm North American. That's how we've been raised. At the end of the movie, the couple get together and ride off in the sunset, or the evil person is done away with, or whatever, right? We've been raised with that kind of hope. And this kind of hope is different. It stays much more in the present. It stays with what is and being real with what is, not what we hope is real, but what is. And that's a tough one, especially when you're young. What is much tougher to live with than what we think we want it to be. So hope has to do with getting up in the morning and feeding my heart with those things that I'm impassioned with. And so that didn't come easily. I had a full-time job during the beginning years of this organization. I was working on it inside of my desk. And what I learned from all those years of working inside of my desk is I kept feeding it. So when I talk to young people about passions and wanting to do your heart's desire in your work, it's about feeding it, no matter if it's 10 minutes a day or 10 hours a week or 5 minutes a month. You just keep it alive. And basically, that feeding it makes it more robust and more connected and more real. So hope is about paying attention to what feeds you, what gets you up in the morning, and paying attention to the ways that you can keep moving in that direction, even if it's not full time. You're not getting the work that you want, but pay attention to how the avenues show up about how you can feed that bigger picture. And sure enough, it does happen. It might take years, but that to me is hope. That's one aspect of it. I'm sure when I hang up, I'll say, oh my gosh, I didn't talk about this and that and this and that. But that to me, I haven't talked about that for a while, but I think it's a really important experience that many of us share and may not express to people who are still finding their way in their careers and in their life.
That was wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing.
Gratitude is about thanking whatever it is that's allowed me to live on this planet in this incredible world. We still have a hell of a lot of beauty. I know that a lot of it is gone. I hear the lack of, I hear the silence between the bird song. I see the spaces in the seabed where the sea stars should be, where the eelgrass should be, where the kelp should be. I see where it's missing. But just as I see it missing and I feel that deep, deep grief that many, many of us are feeling, and it's hard to keep that hope alive when you're feeling that grief, pay attention to the things that are there, because it's still a beautiful world and we're still living in an incredible world right here where the air is sweet, that I've got all my windows open in my house because that air is just, it's just like you want to eat it. Not many people in the world have that kind of air, right? And that kind of bird song and that kind of trees, right? We live in this incredible world. So as you notice the losses, work and fight for those things that are still there because they're worth fighting for, including us. So that to me is about gratitude and feeding that piece of ourselves that's still in love with the world and wants to keep being in love with the world, which is all of us. And I think that's the grand finale. Tell me, if you have time, I'm going to shut up for a minute and I'd love to hear from you. It's like, tell me what hope and gratitude means to you.
So for me, at least, I think I always had this idea that hope was kind of just blinding optimism at first. Like, I have never really seen hope as actually really a good, not necessarily that it was bad, but as just in itself not good, because it's not finding the facts and stuff towards that. And one of the first things that we started reading about, especially with this course and as a few other courses that I have taken, that hope is the gateway towards solving the problems, because it's positive. Well, we talked about this in our class, but positive emotion, and it is looking at facts and knowing that with what you know and the facts that you know, you can move forwards and make a change, either for yourself or for a community. And so that has come from the course for me, at least, and I've enjoyed that. But that's what, hope is.
For me, something that I recognize, I guess, as progress and what is important for me to sort of keep going is a lot of little things of the difference of what I've seen growing up, just in the way of when you go to a coffee shop, the amount of people that bring their own mugs. When you go to the grocery store, the amount of people that have their own bags. And when you look on the shelves, the amount of non-meat products and the amount of different types of milks that aren't dairy and stuff like that, that it shows that every little person that bought that mug, and every person that has that bag, and every person that, you know, doesn't choose dairy or cow's milk. It adds up and it's important, and those changes aren't super significant in the sense of, you know, it's not some huge policy change that we've seen internationally, but I grew up without animal products and stuff. And growing up, I had rice milk because that was the only milk as an option. And now almost any store you go into, you can choose between like at least 5 different types of plant milk. And that means that there's consumers of that. That means that there are people at home sitting there and going, this is more important. This is what I need to do. And I think that's really important to notice, is when it is depressing and there's a lot of stuff that's negative and sad that's happening, when you go out and you see what people are doing, it might be relatively minimal, but people are making a change in their daily lives, and they're changing things that are really established, like their food patterns, their diet, and they're doing it because they know that it's important. And I think that that's something that can snowball into so much more. And that's where you can also get more support for other things, is you get those people that can see the value in something as small as bringing your own mug, or supporting local businesses, or buying local, or taking the bus, you know, stuff like that. And it's not as huge, but I think it's really, really important to recognize and acknowledge and thank the people that are doing that, because it counts. Every little bit counts.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
For me, at least, like in like the terms of COVID-19, what's kept me hopeful is like all of the environmental recovery that's happened right now. It's just like amazing, because it makes me like think about how we can actually do it if everybody like decides to make all these big like lifestyle changes, that we can really change the earth and make it like a lot better, and like allow it to recover like more drastically than like how we are damaging it currently. And that has made me very hopeful, at least, because it's like, well, everybody's staying home and like protecting themselves, it's also protecting the planet, which definitely helps getting through this hard time for sure.
Yeah. Good point.
I think hope is always so complicated for me to think about. And this year has really, I think, fleshed that out for me. I ended up, or coincidentally did like a 5-day intensive course with one of our professors for this course, like for our past reading break. So I've kind of heard her ideas about hope, and I've had them circling in my brain for the last few months. And kind of what I've come up with is that I think hope is my motivation. We talk a lot in our course about how there's kind of a stereotype that hope means complacency, and that if you're hopeful, then you're not going to have any drive and you're not going to really make an effort. But I think the biggest thing I've learned over this past little bit is that the opposite is actually true. I find hope, like when I'm hopeful, I'm ready to run outside and like do all the things and try to fix it, like, and just like give it my all. And I think that that's a really underrated factor about hope, and I think it's one that we all have the power to harness. It's just tricky to find that within yourself.
Thank you.
I don't even know what to add to that. You guys all said such amazing things. I guess like the only thing I can think of is like everyone's like, oh, what are you taking at university? And right away when you tell them environment, they're always like, what the hell are you going to do with that? And I don't know, everyone I think has this very negative like thoughts about it. So like even just talking about things that we can do and seeing like you, Nikki, actually going into the environment and doing things. And like when I volunteer and actually go out and like remove invasive species and stuff, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing to actually be out here doing something and feeling like I'm making a change. And that just makes me feel so hopeful, because especially like in a lot of these other classes we take with environmental studies, you just hear about all the stuff that's going downhill. But when you go out there and actually do something, you're like, I'm making a difference right now. I don't know. I think that's the only thing I can add on. But you guys said such amazing things.
Every single one of you made amazing comments. Thank you for that. That was amazing to me.
So I was just gonna ask too, is it okay if I take clips of audio from this and maybe some videos from your Instagram to put into our final video?
I'd love to see it. And yes.
Okay, I've been like having all these ideas while we're talking, so hopefully it'll like all work out and work
I
together.
would really, really love that.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Nikki. That was so inspiring, and I
delightful.
loved hearing everything you had to say. It was
Are
amazing.
you taking this course through UVic or Royal Roads?
It's through UVic, but they're
yeah.
partnering with Western. Sorry, what's the one in
Yeah,
States?
Western Washington.
Western Washington.
Western Washington. Yeah, great, nice. So is this part of Redfish? It's very close.
No, it wasn't a class on the Redfish list. I was supposed to go on Redfish this summer, but it got canceled, which was very, very sad. But they just kind of put this course together because everything got like canceled, so they wanted to like give the people in the field school an option to take a course if they like wanted to do it throughout the summer, just because you're supposed to get like I think 3 credits for the field school, so they wanted to like give some sort of option.
Super. Okay. If I can be of any assistance or connect you to any other groups or anything, just let me know. And I'd love to see the video and love to see whatever comes out of this. A lot of
Of
bright
course.
minds involved.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Have a
Thank you
wonderful
very
day.
much.
It's
Thank you so
gorgeous
much.
out there.
Yeah.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
You're
Nikki.
welcome.
Bye. Okay, is it just group
You were
members
just
now?
saying-
Oh my god, I feel like I just like,
Holy shit!
that was so cool.
I straight up cried at some point.
I know, I
was
was like, oh my
hiding over
God.
here, like trying to not.
She was amazing. Oh my god,
She's
my
so cool.
heart.
I'm gonna
I feel
send her-
so full.
I'm gonna send her a thank you email this afternoon. So if anyone has anything you want me to mention in the email that you enjoyed about what she said, put it into the group chat, and I'll be sure to add it to the email when I send it off to her. And I'll CC everyone in that email as well.
Okay. You also might want to stop
Can't get
recording.
over how
so it's
genuine
not,
she.
Yes,
like,
let's
super,
stop
super long.
recording.
Oh, true. I just can't like.